What's up, guys? What's going on? We're going to recap the unfortunate loss UCLA just had to Oregon last night, 34-13 L. We're going to wait to get some people in the chat here. I'm going to read the Bet Online advertisement for this specific episode. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200K. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to their website today to get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. All right. So I think we got to start this off, man. I'm going to start us up in about 10 seconds. By the way, if you're in the chat, send a huge congratulations to my guy to my right. He just welcomed his first child with his wife. Very beautiful circumstances surrounding that. It's probably the only positive of the pod today, just being frankly honest with you guys. So give some love to my guy on the right as they became a family of 3, which is really, really awesome.
Thank you, Thriller. Thank you so much.
All right. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's up, guys? And welcome out to the latest edition of the Bruin Bible. We're doing a live show, man. We want you guys to let it out as the UCLA fan base. Another painfully frustrating loss for the UCLA Bruins. 34-13 trouncing. And, Madman, the score didn't even do it justice. There were so many holes for this team, and there's so many different places we can start when it comes to what's going wrong with UCLA and how it's kind of just been a cratering ship. It feels like we're on the Titanic right now in some regards when it comes to watching this program that is setting itself back and setting a precedent coming into a Big Ten football conference that if they don't figure things out fast, this could be a dormant program within the Big Ten moving forward. And there's so many different areas to start, man. Like both sides of the football just look completely lost in that first half. And I think the area I want to start, and Easy Win kind of beat me to it, Eric Bieniemy, man. Here's my issue with this. You have very talented players coming back. We've talked at length that this receiving corps can make plays. By the way, Quasi Gilmer on that first drive, 2 catches to move the sticks. This is a true freshman getting in with about 4 or 5 guys, that can really go out and make plays and move the football for UCLA. This offense is so complicated to pick up for so many different players. And it just makes you question when you have lineage from the Chip Kelly tree. And I know we've talked about this before, Jamal, where that offense was not the problem ever with the Chip Kelly football team. I mean, you guys can blame the recruiting, which is totally fair. You guys can blame the defense, which is totally fair. The offense knew how to move the football and, keep themselves in ball games, even if the defense was allowing what it did last night. Bieniemy coming in on an overhaul, installing a completely new system when it's the problem was not even the offense. I have a little bit of an issue with. I know it's his show. He's going to call his plays. But looking at the results here, Madman, there's 133 teams in college football right now, and we rank 132nd in the run game. It is as bad as it can get on the offensive side of the football right now. The offensive line, I know my guy Josh Carlin, came out to the media last night and says, we got to be better. We got to protect our guy. It is as chaotic as an offensive line as I've seen, as a guy that's covered UCLA, maybe you as well. Ethan Garbers is running for his life every single play, it feels like, out there. There's 2 to 3 guys in the backfield on every one of his dropbacks. So the offensive line is bad. The OC play calling, I get it. It's limited what you can do with the offensive line, but I want to revert a little bit back to what we were doing with Chip. Let's start with Bieniemy, man. What has been your thought process watching Eric Bieniemy in this offense? As we lose another game that, we didn't even stand a chance.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's perplexing. It's confusing. I think, your sort of feeling lost for words is very appropriate, and I think where we should just start is look at the body of work here. These 4 games, and when you look at these 4 games, all 4 games under 20 points, right? We've had 3 games of 13 points and the season high of 17 points. And in that season high, we didn't score in the second half. So we're averaging 14 points a game over 4 games, 4 total touchdowns offensively over 4 games. And when you look last night, you see 172 yards of total offense. I mean, Ethan Garber's 125 through the air, and then again 47 on the ground. TJ leads this team in rushing at 125 yards, not per game, for the season over 4 games. TJ's averaging 31 and a half yards rushing a game, and that is good enough to be the team lead coming off of, love him or hate him, and this is not about the past, but a Chip Kelly regime where this was a team that was averaging between 180 and 200 rushing yards per game pretty consistently. So it's very jarring what we're seeing here, Will. And, Garbers is just in such a difficult predicament here because he just, every time he goes back, to your point, the line just cannot hold their position. They cannot hold a pocket for half a second. I mean, he just has no chance. And, he's trying to do what he can. When he gets the ball out quickly, there's some results there. I thought Garbers, did a great job last night. I mean, even trying to gut it out. I mean, he showed a lot of toughness. He showed a lot of moxie before he ultimately got knocked out of the game, Will. And that was our big fear, is that just given this offensive line, can he just be durable enough to complete a full season? And so deep concerns on the offensive line. There's a lack of talent. There's a lack of depth. There's a lack of size. There's a lack of mobility. And that's not going to change, at least for this 2024 season. So what Juan Castillo has to do, and what Eric Bieniemy has to do, is really, you got to start using more tight ends. I mean, you got to start going more 2 tight end set. I think you got to go Matavao and Pierre, and you got to go more 2 tight ends. And you got to just have an extra blocker there. If you need to come in, even go old school fullback. I mean, if you got to bring in Anthony Atkins to just be a blocker in the backfield and say, look, we're just going to take one offensive weapon on the outside away just because we need to have some semblance of protection. So you either got to go kind of almost exclusively 2 tight end personnel moving forward, or you got to bring Atkins in the backfield. And the second thing, Will, is you just got to eliminate at this point any sort of 7-step drop. And you basically got to take out 90% of your 5-step drop package. It's got to be kind of exclusively 3-step drop, 1 read, 2 read, balls out. Balls out, or you're running, or you're throwing it away. And you just have to sort of simplify things, Will, because you look at a game like last night, J. Michael Sturdivant, 0 catches. Logan Loya, 0 catches. Okay, obviously TMA was injured, but this is not making any sense to me. And obviously the emergence of Gilmer is something we're very excited about, and I think the future of the wide receiver position is very bright. But you have a bona fide, Will, 2nd-round pick at receiver in J. Michael Sturdivant. I mean, this is an NFL guy. Next year when he becomes a great NFL rookie, and people are going to be like, where did this come from? Please don't say where this came from, because Will and I have been talking about this guy for 2.5 years. This guy is an NFL receiver. Logan Loya is your prototypical slot guy. Why these 2 in particular are not getting the ball more, it just is completely beyond me. So he's got to simplify the offense. I think he's got to bring in more max protect here. And he's got to get the ball to his established playmakers more, Will. And it just, hopefully, he's sort of learning that. And I think hopefully there's a stubbornness that goes away, because really, for me, Will, this season begins after next week. But you and I kind of talked about it over the last few weeks. This is 1-4. We knew we were punching above our weight over these last 3 games, and not Indiana, but these last 3 games after that. And now it's just about, how does this team respond after 1-4? Can they go on a run? Can they go 5-2 in the last 7? And can they get to that bowl eligibility? That's where the mindset needs to be. But you got to have a semblance of a team after next week. You can't have Ethan Garbers in a boot, or God forbid in crutches, or something to that extent. And you got to have a team that believes that they can move forward with at least some performances that gives them confidence. And we have yet to see that. Outside of that first half with LSU, we've not really seen any evidence to suggest that that can be accomplished. And that's unfortunate right now.
And that's the huge problem I had last night is I know the fan base has been critical on Ethan Garbers and some has been fair, but I'm going to be honest with you. I would say the majority is not fair when you look at what is going on. The play calling has had to shift where it's no accident we're doing screen passes and quick hit routes now, because that's the only way Garbers is going to have enough time to get the ball out quickly enough. Either does a screen pass, does like a two-step drop at this point, just 1-2 hit type of thing, or, just going around and trying to find the screen pass, like we mentioned. He's dying out there, man. Like, he is rolling out. He has to buy himself so much time just to make a standard throw in this offense because the offensive line is not holding him up. By the way, keeping him in the game when he was hobbling like that, you guys can be as critical as you want on Ethan Garbers. If he is out for the year, guys, this is a one-win team. I'm just going to be very frankly honest with you guys. Ethan Garbers, to me, is not the problem. What's the problem is everything going on around him. If you can't block, that is problem number one. If you're learning a new complex offense that we talked about it. We've said it before at Big Ten Media Day. I've talked to Garbers. I talked to Sturdivant. They're going, hey, this offense was really complex to learn. We're trying to do our best to catch up to what this is. This is a real problem for this offense to figure out. And, you look at the run game. I would push back on Deshaun Foster's comment that if you look real hard, there's been some improvement. Yeah, our defense, let up only 6 points in the second half. But it looked like essentially when you had a huge lead in a game of Madden and you just become uninterested. You're like, I've already won the game. I don't really care. I frankly do not care at this point. This game's already in the bag. I know they're not going to move it on offense. So, let's just keep it out there. To keep Garbers in the game with that hobbled nature, it looked like Byron Leftwich, you may remember when they were carrying him down the field back in those Marshall days. I just thought that was complete mismanagement on the team because, if you, like you said, man, if we are to go 5-2 down the stretch, which to me right now, I'm going to be frankly very honest with you guys, I tend to lean the optimistic side. It's hard for me to imagine this team fixes these massive gaping holes for the second half of the season. But if you want any semblance of a shot at that, keeping QB1 healthy and ready, that's your only goal at this point. So by the time you get to Minnesota, Garbers is fully healthy. Him hobbling around when your offensive line cannot block in that manner, that is complete mismanagement, man. Complete mismanagement. I know Garbers want to go in, whatever. You got to just say, hey, man, this game is over. We got to put Justin Martin in, give him some valuable reps, and then just keep it moving. I just thought that was completely lame on that front. And then the offense, the run game, bro. It's like without a semblance of a threat of a run game, how are you supposed to fool the defense whatsoever about the pass coming? It's just gotten to a point where there's nothing UCLA can do to move the ball on the ground. I know, TJ Harden had that nice 21-yard rush. Without that, he's looking at 12 carries for about 37 yards, like 3 yards a carry roughly there. So just all bad, man. Do you have any comments about the mismanagement, in my opinion, on Garbers staying out there and how the run game has just not been able to pick up anything at all?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the run game. There was, a glimmer there. To your point, Harden had those 2 runs. You mentioned it, kind of the 21-yard run right out of the second half, and that led to a field goal. And then he had that 18-yard run on that following drive. That was 39 yards, Will, out of, and he was 13 carries for 53 yards on the night. So to your point, it was 11 for 14 outside of those 2 runs. And, credit to TJ for being able to maneuver his way to even get those yards. It's sort of a game of minesweeper at this point, even for a running back when you have no blocking whatsoever. And I was actually nervous, Will. There was a moment, if you recall, in the first half of the game where there was a zone stretch read to the right side of the field, the far side of the field. And, one of the Oregon D linemen kind of just jumped on Harden and put all his weight on him. And, Harden went down and, it took him a while to get up there. I was very nervous about that. Oh, and thank you so much, LV White. And thanks so much for being such a great champion and engager of the show. We always really appreciate you. And Will, I think the running game, to your point, is deeply problematic. And with the Garbers play, the fact that he was hurt, Will, that's the one that gets me. I think that, do you keep him out there, deep in your own end, down 21, 9.5 minutes to go? If he's healthy, yeah, because you want to try and get some sense of momentum, some sense of feeling good about yourself going into Penn State, and trying to build on that. But the fact that he was hobbling in the way he was, he was limping. He couldn't really put much weight on that foot. And what the offensive line is going through right now. To put him out there, you're putting him at harm's risk. You're really sort of jeopardizing his health at that point, and you have to sort of question the judgment. Yet again, unfortunately, here we are in Game 4, once again questioning Deshaun Foster's judgment, and that's a difficult place to be. I don't want to sort of pile on while the going is very difficult right now, but he has to be able to exercise some judgment, Will, moving forward. Otherwise, this just is not going to work in the long term in any way, shape, or form. Whether it's judgment with the media, whether it's judgment with play calling, whether it's judgment with in-game decision making, whether it's judgment with personnel, he just has to exhibit a judgment and a critical thinking that he just has not exhibited so far these first four games of the season. So I completely agree with you. Something has to give here with the run game. I think, do you, and the other element here, Will, is do you go 2-back set, with Berger, and do you sort of try and have Berger be kind of a pseudo blocker and kind of a running back as well? You just have to try some different things here if you're Bieniemy, because this poor running game is just suffering from the same thing that the passing game is suffering from, and it's no time. You see, that's where the critique on Garbers, to your point, Will, is very unfair, because it'd be one thing if the running game was working, right? It would be one thing if the running game was getting 120, 140, 150 yards a game, and Garbers' stats were what they are right now. Then if there was criticism on Garbers, that would be fair. Look at the state of the running game, and then just look at the state of the running game last year. Just look at those two things. And then ask yourself, are we really being fair on Ethan Garbers? I don't think Ethan Garbers has been the problem at all. I think Ethan Garbers actually, in a crazy way, has actually played pretty well, considering the situation that he's in with zero time and trying to do what he can. But this team at the bones right now, Will, is deficient. It's at the offensive line and it's at the defensive line. Teams and programs are built from the ground up. They're built from the inside out, from the trenches on out. And right now, the studs of the house, the foundation of the house is infested with termites. The foundation of the house is on a mudslide. We don't have a foundation. Right, we don't have a roof. Well, we don't have the foundation. Well, we got, this thing is, we don't, it's not looking good. In the words of Will Decker, it's not ideal. We don't have a roof. We don't have a floor. I go back to this quote, but it's sort of fitting. It's the Jim Carrey line in Dumb and Dumber, the famous line. We got no food, we got no jobs, our pets' heads are falling off. That's the one line to sort of describe UCLA football in 2024 right now and moving forward in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, man. And my point on this is they moved Josh Carlin to center, who hadn't played it since high school. And I just want to clarify how difficult of a switch that is. Center position is the most difficult position of the offensive line. And we talked about this. We say, hey, the offensive line, they beefed up after spring. We went to that fall practice. They looked like they did add some weight. But the center position is so valuable. It's just not a position we had to think about, as we had a stalwart for the last 3 to 4 years in Duke Clements, right? What Josh Carlin is doing essentially from switching from right guard to the center position is comparing, like, you take a old school NBA center, right? Like just post up, and you're trying to add a 3-point shot. Like it's a very, very, very tough transition. Like I'd say out of every 30 centers you try to do that with, maybe one becomes like a Brooke Lopez type of scenario, right? You and I love basketball. We got to throw some basketball references.
Totally. You're asking Clint Capella to be Kristaps Porzingis, Will. That's really what it is.
You're asking Adam Bona to be shooting like Karl Anthony Towns, which is not possible. So it's just such a dramatic switch. The center position was really critical to this team's success. And Carlin, to his credit, is taking, the blame on himself. But the guy's a very serviceable guard. You know, I just think if you had a center, because you look at most of these plays where they blow up, yes, sometimes it's off the edge. I'm not saying our tackles are particularly great right now either, but the interior pressure is where I'm really seeing it from a film perspective, where this team is just getting crushed. And to kind of pivot to the defensive side of the ball, I got to give a shout out to Brian Addison. That was a very cool game for him. Former Oregon Duck, gets the 96-yard pick six, makes a lot of good plays out there, was second on the team in tackles, laid a hit out in the open field. It looked like some Jack Tatum stuff from those Oakland Raiders teams back in the 1960s. It was fun to watch Addison kind of get out there and play fast and free. But, dude, outside of that, the thought process we had, man, coming in this, I saw it in Hawaii. I know the stats may have not reflected that, but I go, holy crap, we cannot get home to the pass, like to the quarterback. We cannot get home on the pass rush. And it's just, you know, Jacob Busich, I think, is a phenomenal young man. He went to University of Navy, did some great things. Devin Alpue, you know, Notre Dame transfer. I think he would have been buried on the depth chart there, if we're being honest with ourselves. It's just not a great pass rush at the end of the day. We're not able to get home to the quarterback. And I was listening to some live chats last night where it's like, you know, even on some of these really bad UCLA teams in recent memory, we always had one or two guys that were just kind of NFL caliber at getting to the quarterback. I just don't see it on this roster. And it begs the question we've been talking about for a couple weeks now. Where's a Champ Young? Where's Drew Tuizama? Where's Sheriff Seye? You add all these talented pieces in the transfer portal that can help, that can tangibly help. We talked about it. If the pass rush isn't working with that front four, you got to rotate in linemen to tire out the offensive line with fresh legs. I'm seeing none of that. I know Malloy did better in the second half. He only allowed 6 points. But, boy, the two fundamentals of our football are blocking and tackling, and we didn't do any of that in the first half. So what is the conclusion on how we can fix this defensive line? Because we have a tangible answer right here, and they're just kind of ignoring the problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, you said it really well, and we saw this in Hawaii, and I know there was some conversation there, you know, 5 sacks against Hawaii, but it took 5, 6, 7 to get home to be able to get that, and just go back and, you know, sort of look at the tape of who was getting those sacks too. You know, Busich got one, but we had a couple corners. KJ Wallace got one. We had a couple corners get one. Exactly. Everyone was sort of in on the act. It took, you know, when they say it takes sort of a village of people, it took a village. It took a village to get 5 sacks against Hawaii. And Will, again, common themes. This is the 3rd consecutive game without a sack. This is the 3rd consecutive game where an opponent has been 60% plus on 3rd down. Oregon was 9 for 15 on 3rd down. And this is the 3rd consecutive game where you look at a guy like Dylan Gabriel out there. He just could do whatever he wanted. Will, I'll be very honest with you. I think Oregon played a B- game last night, if we're being completely honest. I mean, even the first half, if you think about, right? I mean, they had that trick play with Franklin to Ferguson. He was wide open. He just missed him, right? With Tez Johnson to Ferguson. He just missed him, Will. I mean, there was nobody around, the tight end for 10 yards. And then you see the pass that, he had to the other tight end, to Herbert. It just went right through his hands. That was another touchdown. That's 8 points on the board there. And then you see kind of, it was Johnson, right, who slipped, and that allowed Addison. Great moment there for Addison too, Will, just to sort of double click, coming from Oregon, making that play, and just that's something he's going to remember forever, and so thrilled for him. But again, it came off of an Oregon miscue. I mean, that's 11 points just conservatively. So, it was 28-10 going at the half. I mean, that was sort of 39-3. And then, it's just the second half was just sort of garbage time. I think once Oregon realized that they weren't going to kind of be perfect in the first half, they took the foot off the gas and they were just sort of going through the motions. But defensively, there was no resistance whatsoever in that secondary, because, again, there was just too much time for the likes of Dylan Gabriel to just be able to pick this defense apart. And so whether it was, pass rush, whether it was sort of run stuffing, again, we're just left with answering the same questions. We sort of said it now for a few weeks. Why aren't these players getting more reps? The Achempongs of the world. Why aren't you rotating more? If you cannot have quality of talent on the defensive line, you have to overwhelm your opposition with quantity of talent and really go deeper. in terms of rotation. And LV White, I completely agree with you. We have the talent that's equal to or better than an Indiana or a Duke or a UNLV. Absolutely. UNLV lost their quarterback. Their starting quarterback to all this sort of NIL controversy and whatnot,
Crazy
came back,
story.
won another game. Absolutely. And they're in a great spot. This is about coaching. We have the Jimmies and the Joes. Well, it's the X's and the O's right now, and usually it's the other way around. There's plenty of talent on this team to be a 7, 8, perhaps even more win team, and we're just not seeing it.
Yeah, it's very confusing, man, because just the level of inexperience, and even when you lean on a Bieniemy, we've talked about it before, without standing next to Andy Reid, who is one of the great coaches of our time, he's been a relative failure as a play caller on offense, if we're being completely honest with each other. I know the Commanders fans, I've got a couple in my life, they're like, this guy couldn't really call some plays last year when he was here. Like, they totally abandoned the run and were throwing the ball a lot when it was very obvious. They had some decent running backs there. Brian Robinson Jr. is really making an impact for the Commanders this year. But, man, it is the lack of experience of coaching is really showing. And the sad thing, to LV's point, we have talent, man. We've been saying it all year. This was the year you had to get right, man. You had to get to that bowl game to prove, because next year, guys, it is going to be a bare cupboard. And the sad part is this was one of our big recruiting weekends for a lot of kids coming out there. The game was over in 10 minutes, man. Like, we were waving the white flag. Like, it was done. It was Rocky 3 where they're like, he's going to get killed in there. You know what I mean? Like, it was one of those.
We got Ivan Drago last night, Will, but it was almost, Drago didn't really even have his fastball. It was sort of it was Drago's 88-mile-an-hour fastball.
I will break you, and he broke us. Effectively quick.
He didn't even need to say I'll break you. He was just like, I'll bend you tonight. That should be good enough, So
yeah, I'll bend you, and it'll somehow still break you. You know what I mean? Like, it was like that. And, like, all credit to Oregon. Like, there's a scenario where Dylan Gabriel owns a ton of passing records, when his season's over for Oregon. Will Stein's going to be a head coaching candidate somewhere, the offensive coordinator there. But I agree. I think Oregon, for the most part, man, they kind of have that LSU stench on them where it's like, man, you guys, your record's pretty solid, but if you, like, flip it a couple different ways, Boise State was in that game to the fourth quarter. I think it was Idaho.
Yep. Idaho was 17-14.
Yeah. I mean, there's been, like, these teams aren't as dominant as we think they are, as their record states they are, their brand says they are. And we're still getting absolutely crushed. I mean, if Idaho can hang in with this team, if Boise State, I know Jeanty might be the best running back I've ever seen at the college football level, who we covered at the LA Bowl last year. But, man, like, we are more talented teams than Idaho and Boise State. It is 1,000,000% the X's and O's. It is not the Jimmies and Joes. And it's just frustrating at that point, man. Guys,
Will, I just want to add something that you mentioned for Deshaun's sake, for Bieniemy's sake, just sort of moving forward. We can't sort of overstress the criticality of trying to get to a bowl game this year, and that's why I'm sort of at the point where it's okay. It's going to be 1-4. This is going to be more of the same next week with Penn State. Penn State's a great team, probably maybe the best team of the three. If you say LSU, Oregon, Penn State right now, who's kind of playing the best, who's jiving the best, is probably Penn State. And the fact that it's at Penn State, it's the toughest of the three games in a lot of different ways. And so, look, we're coming back from 1-4. But again, Will, when you think about who's leaving this team at the end of this season, you're talking about 12, 13 starters off of this team. And if you can't get those 10 to 15 extra practices in December, if you can't get that additional platform from a bowl game standpoint to be able to recruit nationally, how are you going to fill that cupboard next year? Maybe we get a schedule reprieve. Maybe the schedule's a little bit easier from this year to next year, and that's how we sort of make it up. But talent-wise, the product on the field, just in terms of raw horsepower, it's going to take a dip next year. And so if this is going to be the coaching moving forward, we're looking at a 24 and a 25 season that's really dire. And we're going to be in a situation here where, 26 is sort of make it or break it. Otherwise, we're really threatening, like we talked about, to kind of let go of this rope as a football program where you may never get it back. And so it's really imperative.
And the thing is, man, is you make the move to the Big Ten. I think this is why people are so critical on Martin and the AD and everything that's going on there. And to be fair, like, we don't know all of the details going on. Like, we've been openly positive. It's like, how do you fire a coach when your top donor and your chancellor are against it? Like, those are your only real two bosses as an AD. If Casey Wasserman's saying, hey, man, I'm pulling the funding, that's like 50 to 60% of your NIL right there alone. So, like, you can't really piss that guy off, nor the only guy you report to as the AD is the chancellor. So if the chancellor's like, hey, man, like, you negotiated this Big Ten move, we got to pay Cal 10 million extra compared to what else is going out there. I'm not really feeling, another buyout with the deficit we're already in. So I want to be clear with that. But the way it played out, where Chip leaves and you are behind schedule going into this is the big boy conference, the Big Ten. We talked about it from a football perspective. It's the SEC and the Big Ten. That is how college football is. When you do not have a coach in February, man, we were at Super Bowl week and Chip Kelly left. We've talked about at length how, if Jed Fish had gotten that call earlier, if Jonathan Smith had gotten that call earlier, they'd be in Westwood right now, here today, to help us out. When you're so far behind schedule and you're trying to make lemonade with shit, so to speak. I had no other word to use but shit because of what's going on with this, like, just the lack of experience at the head coaching position. It's never going to go right, man. It's never going to go right. And we're just seeing the results of them putting that together. I mean, is that just a fair assessment, man? Because with the lack of being behind like this and the lack of salvaging this season, I mean, we penciled in the Minnesota game as a win. They barely beat Michigan. They nearly lost to Michigan this week, or barely.
Yeah. Whatever, and Will, I think it's spot on. And I think we have to, that's the game for me where if we don't see improvement, if we don't see sort of a turning of the corner, and Duke, excellent point. I mean, we saw it. Guys are open on every play. Absolutely. I mean, it's coaching at the finest level. And when you look at the weapons that UCLA has this year, you look at Keegan Jones, again, not getting enough touches. You look at the guys we mentioned on the outside. You look at Justin, well done. Well done. That might be a hashtag that trends on Twitter, frankly. I mean, that's slightly well done. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's that's the game, Will, for me, is that Minnesota game where if you're not going to see a change, because you're going to see a drop off in talent. Minnesota plays SC this week. They're probably going to come in 2-4 off of 3 straight losses. UCLA is going to come in 1-4 off of 4 straight losses. It's at home. That's a game you have to be able to get. And that's a game where you have to be able to show tangible improvement, both on the X's and O's side, as well as just on an overall just ability to execute perspective. If you don't see that in the Minnesota game, Will, I'm with you. It's going to be hard to fathom a scenario where this team can win another game or two over the course of this season if the Minnesota game goes south. So that's where, to me, the Deshaun coaching, the Eric Bieniemy coaching adjustments have to take place, because as bad as things are, we're just hitting above our weight a little bit right now. But it should be better results, to our point. You should be able to put more than 13 on the board, more than 17 on the board with the talent you have. You should be able to push these teams because, frankly, these teams have been pushed by much lesser programs, by much lesser competition earlier in the year. Now, you can argue, yes, these teams have sort of hit some of their stride. They've gotten some of the early game struggles out, but still, you have to be able to put some resistance. Look, guys, there was no offensive touchdown last night. There was the opening drive, right, where there was the field goal, really nice ball to Matavao, nice couple balls to Quasi Gilmer, and then it was 4 straight 3-and-outs. Then we had the one run by Harden to set up the other field goal, another run by Harden, and then that sort of second to last drive by Garbers where the drive started at the 12-yard line. He found Jack Peterson, made a couple of nice short throws. Will, that's 5 plays on offense. I mean, everything else was, 4 or 5 yards, if anything at all. So just the product on the field right now is lacking in such a significant way. I'm really concerned, Will. I mean, I've lived through a lot as a UCLA fan. We 4-7, 3-8, 99 after the 20 straight was a rough period. There was a rough period from '06 to 11, '06 to 11 before Hundley came. We had some really rough seasons. First 2 seasons with Chip was rough at 3-9 and 4-8. So we've gone through some 3-4 win seasons over the last 25 years. But you always kind of had moments in those seasons where, there were moments and there was life. And right now, my deep concern moving forward is this team looks lifeless. And if that continues beyond Penn State, that's going to be something that is a very scary proposition moving forward for this program.
Absolutely, man. And, just to kind of close on that, I just think there's so much to be, what we can improve upon. And we've only really had 2 halves of decent offensive football. It was the Hawaii game, the second half, and the LSU first half, where we made some runs. Outside of that, we have looked lifeless on offense. And that is being generous in a lot of regards, saying that about this football team. We care about this team, guys. I don't know anybody else that's doing a UCLA podcast that, we're coming in on a Sunday morning after another painful loss. Keep the faith, guys. I think we can turn this thing around. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take investment from the fans like you guys as well. Shout out to the students for going to the game, by the way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The student section was packed. I was very proud to see that from afar. But, guys, it's going to get a lot worse before it's going to get better. And I just want you guys to buckle your seatbelt. By 2026, I'm hoping we have some light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you guys for coming out, man. We are going to be out. We're going to be doing the Penn State preview this week. So stay tuned for that. I'm actually hoping, I guess I'll leave you with this. Do you think there's any advantage to playing Garbers this week with already the hobbled issue he has against Penn State at Penn State? Because like I said, man, if Garbers is out, and you guys can be as critical as you want, if you don't have an offensive line, if you don't have a run game, if your coach is making it more complex than it needs to be, why, it's not going to work. You know what I mean? So I think with the Justin Martin thing, I would toss him out there just to, put some safety on our guy, Mr. Ethan Garbers. Do you think that should be an option heading to Penn State?
I do, Will. I think it's an excellent point because, again, we have to try and set something up in terms of momentum after the 1-4. And look, Will, we saw it in spring and in fall, particularly in fall. The gap between Garbers and the next set of quarterbacks is vast. I mean, it's a standard deviation or 2. So this quarterback competition was not close. And I think having Justin Martin be healthy and just get some, what incredible experience for that sophomore to be able to get, to be in Happy Valley and experience that for a game, and how much learning he's going to get himself set up for next year's quarterback competition and perhaps have a leg up through this experience. And you're in a situation where, Will, if Garbers is even 75%, I would say no. I would say you sit him and you get ready for Minnesota onwards to be able to make this run because it's going to look unlikely. Because if he takes another big hit, now you're down to Martin. And Martin's a really nice prospect, but it's going to take time. He's very raw. And then you're going to sort of lose some games that you could have potentially won. Minnesota, Rutgers, Iowa, Fresno State. These are the games we're kind of looking at and saying, hey, if we can just show some life, if we can tighten up some things with X's and O's, can we get those 4 games? Those aren't exactly world beaters. Can you get those 4 games or be in those games to be in a position to try and win it at the end? But that's not going to be very likely with Justin Martin going through his own growing pains. So you're actually doing 2 really nice things. You're giving Martin some experience for next year's quarterback competition, and you're giving Garbers much needed rest to set up a second half run. So I completely agree with you, Will. The way he looked last night, I don't think he's going to get to 75% by game time. And as a result of that, I think you got to put Martin out there.
Yeah, and I think the last point I'll make is Mike Tomlin did this interview with Ryan Clark and Fred Taylor. They have their own podcast that's with Fanatics, and he had this really awesome point as a head coach that you want to see other coaches make. And he goes, if the team isn't responding or they're showing different attitudes or something, I got to check myself and go, hey, maybe I'm just not coaching these guys. Maybe I'm not teaching them everything I need to teach. I need to step my game up as a coach. Right. That's the challenge I'd put on Bieniemy, because if it ain't working, oftentimes it isn't that. It's how you're teaching them the offense and moving forward. Check yourself, man. You are one of the coaches that we were most excited to have at UCLA, given your past, your Super Bowl championship pedigree that you had. You got to check yourself in the mirror and go, hey, I need to be better for this team. Same with Juan Castillo, same with Deshaun Foster. Because at the end of the day, whatever concepts you guys are trying to teach these kids, it's not working. They're not grasping it. So sometimes it's not the student, it's the teacher. And if you look back at last year's success, Chip was at least able to coach his offense in the right direction. That's all I'll say. So, guys, thank you guys so much. We're going to be coming live this week for the Penn State game. Stay tuned for that. Once again, wish my guy Madman some serious love. They just welcomed him and his wife, their first child, man. So the addition makes it 3 people in the family. My niece is going to be out there. You know, we love her to death already, man. So it's going to be a lot of.
Thank you so much, brother. I have the same number of hours of sleep over the last 5 days, 6 days as UCLA has offensive touchdowns this year, you know? So I'll leave you with that, but it's such a joy to have her. My life is, you know, inextricably changed moving forward. For just indescribable reasons. And you know, thank you so much, Thriller. It's such a joy to do this with you.
Gotcha, guys. Well, hey, we'll see you guys soon. You guys have a good one.